welcome to another edition of Books in the World. Books in the World is a production of the Cape Cod Writers Center. We've enjoyed 40 years, actually almost 50 years, of producing cable television programs that contain everything having to do with the love of literature. Today, we are lucky enough to be with Christie Lowrance. Christie has passionately pursued her writing career as a journalist, freelancer, travel writer, biographer, and a writing instructor. Her work covers diverse subjects, primarily relating to Cape Cod historical, artistic, literary, and commercial life. She has taught writing at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, Cape Cod Community College, as well as for Cape Cod Writers Center in our summer Cape Cod Writers Conference programs. She holds a bachelor's in English from Hobart and William Smith Colleges, and a master's degree in professional writing from the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. Christie is the author of Nature's Ambassador, The Legacy of Thornton W. Burgess, a 320-page biography published in 2013 by Schiffer Publishing. Her book is the first complete biography of the preeminent 20th century naturalist, wildlife advocate, children's author, and pioneer in environmental education and radio programming. Mm-hmm. Actually, we had Christie on Books in the World in March of 2014, shortly right after you published this book, and Madeline Holt did the interview, which I will be thrilled to put that link down to get a deeper dig into Nature's Ambassador. Let's start with I know that when we talked previously, you spoke about how much you loved teaching. Mm-hmm. And being a writing instructor, and how important that was to you to have had that as part of your diverse writing career. So why don't we start there? Tell me what it is that you love about it. And I know that did you most recently teach at the community college, Cape Cod Community College, or was it?
Yes, right. I may be teaching some smaller classes outside of the academic realm, mm-hmm. But that was the last time I was in a classroom as such. But I taught for about 12 years altogether, and I think I had mentioned to you that the teaching of writing was important to me, because when I began teaching at UMass Dartmouth as a TA, very nervous, petrified, in fact, of having a classroom of 18, 20-year-olds in front of me and having to convince them that this was worth their while, well worth their while. It was extremely daunting. But once I got my sea legs with the classroom and with the students, I could draw on almost 20 years as a professional writer. Mm-hmm. And prior to coming into the classroom as a teacher, I had been freelance writing, I had done travel writing. And I estimate I probably have interviewed about, 1,000 people would not be, would not be unreasonable. Mm-hmm. That's, that sounds like an enormous amount of feature articles, but when you're doing travel writing, you are interviewing, you are collecting information from individuals, and that's what an interview is, whether it's an extended interview like this, or you're calling up a motel owner to get information about their motel. Right. So I come into the classroom with this background, and also the writing that accompanies those years. And then prior to that, as an English major, writing for 4 years constantly. Mm-hmm. And so your relationship as a writer with the printed word, with sentences, with word choices, with forming ideas into a page, mm-hmm. Making the idea longer, making it, more compact. That's, as you know, Kathy, as you know well, that's very hard to do. It's very difficult. And good writing that looks effortless is only because a person has spent hours paring down, you know, and so this sense of the totality of what it takes.
You have the full picture that you walked into that classroom with, the full spectrum of what it looked like to be a writer.
Right.
And so was it hard to actually begin on a level that your students could relate to with?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
If I could find the textbook, John Lannon was one of the teachers at UMass Dartmouth, and it was his textbook that I was using. When I got my hands on it, I had never seen exactly a layout of what I had been doing. So John Lannon says, to teach writing, you are basically teaching worthwhile content, sensible organization, and readable style.
And you were intuitively doing that.
And yes, I'd been doing it for years and years. And I went, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful.
He found me.
Worthwhile content, sensible organization, readable style. I love it.
Yes.
And so everything, I was just like a thirsty person, you know. I had the best time because I understood all this. It wasn't just something remote to me.
It wasn't a theory. You had practiced it.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't a theory.
Exactly.
So when you went from teaching to full steam ahead writing this biography, and you had a freelance career between those two things.
Right.
But what was why did you choose Thornton Burgess? And why, I know that you have a lot of historical figures that are on your back burner to actually dive into. And tell me what it is about, is it that you
Thornton
realized
Burgess?
there wasn't a piece out there of that content or that depth?
Well, the thing was, and I like the way you've set up this question, because I feel in my life as a writer, there've been chapters, there've been segments, the journalistic segment, and that was followed by the magazine writing segment. And I was writing for Good Housekeeping. I had articles in Good Housekeeping and Country Journal and Americana and Oceans.
Wow.
And then coming into the 90s, there was the academic studies and the teaching, and in the 90s that continued, and then maybe 15 years of that, and then the biography. You're quite right, and the other work stopped. And I think too, writers, there are times when you're calling on different things inside of yourself. You know,
it's an ADD life when it comes to all the diversity. And then at some point you have to hone in when you have a major work that you're working on. And that can be really, to put everything else aside. Yeah. It can be difficult.
And you know this well, Kathy, but the decisions that you have to make, and I don't know if this is worthwhile to try to show this, but I don't know if you can see the table of contents there.
Oh, yes, I can.
But if you can see it, what you're looking at is part 1, the origins, part 2, the writer, part 3, the naturalist, and part 3, the legacy. But I was breaking out into a cold sweat when I began writing, and I'll get to why Thornton Burgess in just a second. But this is a writerly question, a writerly issue. And I thought, how am I going to weave together? This man was a children's writer, renowned, beloved household name in the 20th century for his children's books, The Adventures of Reddy Fox and Peter Rabbit and Johnny Coon, and all the different animals, and Old Mother West Wind. And on the other hand, he's a hardcore naturalist, and he helped with passage of the Migratory Bird Treaty Act in 1918.
He established a lot.
But he used his radio program for promoting environmental education. And my challenge as a biographer was how to weave these together. They are incompatible,
right,
in many ways. The little sweet children's stories and the hardcore science.
Right. How do you get the full spectrum of them
to break those down? I think you were referring to the intensity of the thinking that it takes as a writer.
Exactly.
And just that simple. When I taught writing, I always told students that creating the content, that's kind of fun. Doing the style, that's your thing. The hard part is organization.
Right.
And you will sink or swim as a writer on your organization.
Or you can float for a while. You can float for a while.
Yeah, yes, but not
and
forever.
You're going down. Exactly.
No, you absolutely are going to go down on your organization.
Exactly.
And I knew this, and I thought, I've got this fabulous subject, and the definitive biography on him has not been written. I thought, how am I going to do this? And I really just had to sweat it through, and I had to believe that I could sort it out. And ultimately, I did.
This opened a whole different world for you to have produced this biography. That it seems like now it's triggered more public figures that you feel haven't been fully explored in content. And tell me what you have on your plate for. I know that one of them is concerned was you had done your thesis on him.
Right.
So it was the George Bass.
You've done your homework, Kathy. Yeah. I'm really impressed.
Well, it's so interesting. I was trying to decide which piece of the pie are you and I going to slice today, because there's a lot.
I know. And we haven't even talked about Bob Hayden and house moving yet.
I know. True.
We'll have to think about that. But your question, the first question, I didn't dodge exactly, but didn't get to it. Why Thornton Burgess? I'd written about him as a freelance writer. I knew the subject. I thought I was wrong, but I thought I did. And I live in the house he was born in.
Oh no! And, how did I miss that?
Oh no! Well, I don't play it up, but it's true. It's true. And Thornton Burgess, this was his childhood area here. He lived in many of the houses here in the village. It's a grand story, really.
He's our own homegrown boy when you think
he is our homegrown boy. He so is. And the research, I'll just say, on our homegrown boy took me to Japan, Australia. His obituary was read in Africa.
Oh my goodness.
He was just amazing, the breadth and the scope.
Right, and beloved.
Of him as a children's writer. But so I basically thought, this is a good story, and I think the anniversary of Old Mother West Wind was coming up, and I thought, as a freelance writer, you jump on things like that. Right. So I thought I would do that. And it took much longer because the story was far more complex and more interesting. I interviewed people at the Smithsonian Institute. I interviewed, scientists. I interviewed grandchildren of his. And this is the thing too, Kathy. We were thinking you and I would talk about the path of a writer.
Right.
And the adventure of it. The specialness, and I'll just say, and I realize George Bass is over here waiting for.
No, that's okay. Let him wait, because I do love discussing the path of a writer, and especially a writer who's a research junkie like you are.
Yeah,
because I can relate to even the tiniest little ancillary character. If they have a job, I want to know everything about that job. Because it just adds a depth that you can't without that research.
Yes. And what was I saying?
I interrupted you. So
no. I know what I was going to say. No, that's okay. That 4 of his grandchildren were alive when I started the book. And in the process of my research, 2 of them passed away.
Oh my goodness.
And so I was the only one who had that opportunity as a writer to interview them. And this has happened to me more than once, that you take advantage of your time, your inspiration, your opportunity. It may not come back. And you may be the only one.
And you don't have any idea what the depth or the value is of what you're doing until that opportunity is passed.
Yeah. And I think what's amazing about Thornton Burgess is his influence on children. And he understood this. His message, those children's books were fine, but literature was not his passion. Nature was his passion, and nature education was the passion of his passion.
Well, what a great vehicle he used.
Yes. And you know why? Because children, unlike adults, absolutely soaked it up. And who was reading oftentimes those stories to those children, but the adults.
Right. Absolutely.
So he had a double advantage. But Thornton Burgess he cared about things like leg hold traps for animals. He lobbied against that. He developed very early a radio program, and that's another whole conversation.
Right.
He was a pioneer radio programmer. He was a pioneer environmental educator. No question about that.
So let's break away from Thornton Burgess a little bit, because I feel like I want to cover some of the current things that you're doing, because it's pretty exciting. I want you to talk a little bit about the poemathon that you put together and what the result of that was that you did for Sandwich Arts Alliance over the course of this past year. And because I think it's a fascinating story, especially because you didn't even know what you were starting when you began it.
Yes, well said. Oh, you're so right. And I feel like I'm always sort of dropping back from your wonderful questions, because the drop back to the poemathon and that whole project was that I worked 4.5 years on Thornton Burgess, 5 years, we'll say, actually. And then I worked on selling that book, and then I started the research on George Bass, underwater archaeology, and there's a whole great rationale for that interest. But I began to feel tired. And I thought mentally, and I resisted it. I didn't like it. I didn't want to deal with it until finally I just had to say, I think you're tired. You've been researching and writing heavily, intensely for almost a decade, almost 10 years.
Yeah, there's exhaustive writing, and that's definitely exhaustive writing.
Yes, it is. And I think my brain was just saying, time for a break.
Right.
And so it was at that point that I really got involved in a different way with the Sandwich Arts Alliance. And when the pandemic came along, I overheard somebody at the Arts Alliance Center say, well, the food pantry is in, really serious trouble. And I thought, oh, goodness, that's terrible. Sandwich Food Pantry. What can we writers do at the Sandwich Arts Alliance, a literary group? How can the literary group help? And I thought, well, we could give money. But then I thought, well, maybe something a little more creative and fun. And I thought, what about if we offer to write a poem for someone, if they'll offer to make a donation to the food pantry, minimum of $15. And they have to tell us, what do they want that poem about? Who's it for? What's the purpose of the poem? And then I went around tapping people on the shoulder and saying, would you write a poem, for this poemathon thing? Yeah, okay. And I went along and I was asking people, I simply thought, I had no idea whether they could write poems or not, but my feeling is, if you're a writer, you can use words.
You can write a poem.
Of course you can write a poem. Of course you can.
Right.
So,
listen, poems have their own language. When I think about even the capitalization of poetry and the rules with that, poetry is a special thing.
It truly is. It truly is.
Yeah.
And this project, you're quite right in saying that I didn't know where it was gonna go. I didn't have the slightest idea of it. In fact, the first poem that was assigned, I thought, I'll have to write this myself. I don't know how this is going to work.
Yeah.
I'll have to be the guinea pig here. So I wrote the first poem.
How was the first poem received that you gave back to the person?
It was very well received. It was for Max. Todd Herman is a performing arts coordinator at the Arts Alliance, and he had requested this for his son. And I'd never met the son, but I do, having two sons, know something about boys and something about being on that threshold. His son was going to be going into high school. And so I wrote a poem, and Todd loved it, and the son, a laconic young man, he gave the thumbs up on it too. So yeah, but the image that I had, and I just couldn't knock it out of my mind, was someone standing in a doorway, and the hand on the door frame, and the feet on the threshold, and looking out.
Right.
And what's coming down the road and what's waiting for you as you walk out that doorway.
Well, that's beautiful imagery, and I'm very appropriate for somebody making that big jump into that level of education.
But you know something, oh my gosh, we're off the subject.
Wait, before you, how many writers did you end up having that actually produced poems for this?
I think we had about 20.
Oh my goodness. And so how many poems were produced overall?
I think we had about 30 poems. Some people wrote a couple.
And did you end up asking for a specific amount of a donation for the food pantry?
We just asked for at least $15, and some people gave much more than that.
Absolutely.
So it was very, very satisfying.
And then you had said that it was turned into a surprise to realize that you had this compilation of what turned out to be amazing work from people that were not known for their poetry.
That's
were experimenting per se.
Yeah. Some of them were, but some of them weren't. One person said,
"I've never." It would be an experiment.
Well, but the thing that distinguished them was they were willing.
Right.
They said, "Okay, right, I'll give it a shot."
Yeah.
And that was it was very exciting. We also had artwork that was included in it. Two of the literary folks are also very talented artists, Carolyn LeComp and Jana Dillon. And there's some photography in there too. So this was an offshoot. There was a little lag time. We had the Poemathon. We raised, I think, $750 for the food pantry. With a handful of poems. So we felt pretty good about that.
Yes.
And we thought, this is gorgeous stuff. We've got to do something with it. So we decided to put together a book, and that led to this project. And then this project, Pebbles in the Stream, after we've covered costs, which we've almost done now. We're still trying to sell the book. So anyone wants to buy Pebbles in the Stream.
Where can they find Pebbles in the Stream? Is it through the Sandwich Arts Alliance website?
Yeah, it's on the website, right? And it's also
will that become an additional fundraiser after it's covered its cost?
Oh yes, 100% of the sale, not proceeds. 100% of the sale goes to the Arts Alliance.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, it really is, because each book, I think it's $19.95, and we gave a lot of thought to, and we talked with folks at Titcomb about what Titcomb's bookstore, what a reasonable price would be. So anyway, so we had this project in hand, this book. We had a book launch, a proper book launch.
Nice.
And we're continuing.
Book launch is difficult in a pandemic.
Yes, it is. It is. I think it was a little bit before, but then during the pandemic, we created a couple videos. One was called The Purpose of a Poem. And that, I just consider it utterly amazing. The purpose of a poem was to have joint interviews with, not interviews, meetings of the person who commissioned the poem and the person who wrote the poem.
Oh, nice.
And
that's wonderful.
In a number of cases, people did not know each other. Like I did not know the boy I was writing the poem for. But it was just more exciting than I can even say. How
sweet that is too. It's just very sweet to
it's very sweet. Yeah. And so what joined in some cases two strangers was a poem.
Isn't that amazing? Very amazing.
And the purpose of a poem, you know, that the purpose of the poem was really satisfied.
So speaking of all of
these
getting together, I understand that we're actually going to start physically seeing you out and about at places, speaking engagements with real people. You ready for that? A real speaking engagement. Tell me what you have up coming up with that.
Yeah,
I know the Zoom is fun, but let me tell you, there's nothing like seeing somebody in person. So that's starting to happen.
I know, and I think we're all hungry for that. And I've had double vaccination, so you know I'm ready. I'm ready to go.
Good.
But I am going to be talking at the Cape Cod Museum of Natural History on May 27th for their Lunch and Learn. Yeah, May 27th.
Christie, this is so wonderful, and I really appreciate you being with us today. And we look forward to all of the things that you have to offer for writing for the years to come. It sounds like you're absolutely still charged with the job and the privilege of writing stories. We appreciate it. Thank you.